That's a different one.
So I looked at the blog, the discussion blog, and a handful of you responded, like 5 out of, what do we have here? 20, 22. So you might take a look at that this week. And the assignment, I also got only 2 responses. Now, I have to say that I didn't set it up right, and I corrected it Friday. So some of you may have just looked at it and given up trying to respond. I have to open a special response. I have to check a couple of response mechanisms, which I always forget to do because Canvas goes on and on and on with its instructions. But I did correct it Friday. So, and you can go back and do that. So I explained how those assignments and discussion blog affect your grade, right? But it's up to you whether you want to use them or not. You know, you control your class here. So if you just don't want to do it, that's fine. You know, you'll learn more if you do, but it's up to you. You know, we're all adults here. But I do want the assignment of the line drawings and the measuring. I do want you all to do that. That was kind of a spontaneous assignment, and I assigned it because that's so vital to knowing how to work with blueprints, knowing how to use the scale. So I want, a couple of you did it, and I want the rest of you to do it. So so one of you did it and took a picture of it and sent me, you know, attached the picture to an email, which is fine. That's the way my students have done it in the past. You all have my email. Somebody else, Marcos, I think, you didn't do it that way, right?
Yeah, no, I attached it to the email and sent it to you.
Yeah, okay.
But I did it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So Hugo, did you get my response to your assignment? It was an email?
Yes, I did. I got that. Thank you.
Okay.
I didn't 100% understand
Okay.
what you're saying, but I did get your email.
Okay. So I'll explain it when we look at a plan, and I'll look at an actual dimension line a little later on. I don't doubt you can do this assignment, all of you, but it's really important. So I want you to take the time to do it just for yourself to make sure you're comfortable with using that. And then we'll just forget about it and assume we know it and move on. Okay? And also the assignments and the blog, if you were really busy extraordinarily last week, you can do it anytime. You can do it the next week if you want. I'm not a real stickler on having to do it. It's just kind of, the discussions are kind of nice for you because you find out about each other, which is really great. And you have ideas about where you're working that you can contribute. So it kind of broadens the base of the class a little bit. And the written assignments are just to help you understand certain things. And I don't do either the blog or the written assignment until after class because I want to know, you know, how the class went and where the weak parts look to me, and then I'll address further questions to that area. So how about you guys? Any problems or questions you want to ask before we get started? Well, your silence isn't necessarily bad. It could be that everything's going smoothly.
Could you go over the homework questions, Patrick?
Would I go over them? Yes, I meant to. Yeah. Do you have them in front of you? I don't want to go to Canvas. Does anybody have them handy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could you read one at a time to me, Alec, and then I'll.
So the first one, on a 1 inch by 1 inch equals 40-foot engineer scale, how many feet would a 1/4 inch equal?
Yeah. So with, I was talking to John earlier. He wondered if buying a engineering scale is useful. The engineering scales are really simple. They're multiples of 10. There's a 10 scale, a 20 scale, a 30 scale, a 40 scale, a 50 scale, a 60 scale. So if you know how to work with one, they're kind of all the same. And you can work with those without a scale. And that's why I asked you to do what you did. So say you didn't have an engineering scale, but you had a plan that had a scale on the site plan, say that was 1 inch equals 40 feet. You can just take your ruler. And so every inch would be 40 feet. So that much you can do. You probably want smaller quantities within that. So then you just break it down. So you say, well, half of that 40 feet would be 20 feet, and that would be half of an inch or a half an inch. So half an inch would equal 20 feet, a quarter of an inch, half again would be 10 feet. And you can keep going, breaking it down. So you have really small increments, and you can probably utilize those to read the plans okay without that engineering scale. So this one was a quarter inch. So you just have to think proportionally. So 1 inch equals 40. So quarter of an inch is a fourth of that. Quarter of an inch is fourth of a whole, 1 whole inch. So a fourth of 40 would be 10. So the two of you that submitted those got those right. A quarter inch equals 10 feet. So is that clear about the scale to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, and Alec, what was the second one?
Second one. What two dimensions does siting a house on its site concern?
Yeah, that was a lousy question, but
I was confused.
I know. Well,
That makes me feel better.
It wasn't a good question if you listened to every word I said last week, which nobody in the right mind would. When we went to site that house, when we did that exercise, I said a house has to be sited horizontally. That means on the land. Horizontally means flat, parallel to the land. So it's 10 feet from this border, 20 feet from that border. So I call that horizontal. And then vertically, you have to site the house, elevation wise, how far above the ground, the grade it is. So you do both those things. That's all that is. I don't even know if other architects or contractors use that term horizontal and vertical for that. Somewhere along the line, I just made it up and I've been using it. But it's good to be creative in life. Yes, carpenters and contractors can be creative. You're creative with your hands for sure, but being creative with your mind is a good thing. So make up words. Use horizontal and vertical a lot because they're very descriptive words. Okay, the third one.
What does arcing a tape measure mean?
Oh yeah. Okay. So we talked about that, but it's probably for some of you the first time you've heard about it and it may not have stuck. That's fine. Part of when I get answers to those questions, it tells me where my teaching's been weak. So it's really, as long as a few of you do it, it's fine. It really helps me out because then I can say, oh, I didn't really explain that enough. So arcing is something that not all contractors would even call it that. I think many contractors use it, although not all of them use it. I know ones that, and that's a creative use of a tape measure. Mostly tape measures are used in a straight line. You measure a distance from here to there. To use it as a compass is what you're doing, is a novel use of a tape measure, but it's a good use, okay? So what you're doing is you're pinning down the what do you call the little hook? Hook? Is that what we call a thing on the end?
Yeah.
Okay, you got to help me out. I'm an elder now, and if I don't use a term for more than a year, it kind of disappears into a special area in the brain that's a little less easy to access. So, and I forget the simple things like a hook. I would forget that. So a hook on the end, you put that as one end of your tape, and since you're going to pull the tape, the hook will be pulled out. You hold that firm to the area, to the point you have that you've on that siting plan. It was the first point we established. So you're going to put that in there and hold it firm. And then another person, it takes two people to do this, is going to pull the tape out to the length you want. On that, it was like 26 feet or something like that. And then they're going to put their finger on the 26-foot mark, and they're either going to take the tape and go past a string line and mark where it hits that, or you could do it in the sand, actually make an arc with your finger. And where that arc hits the other line, that would be the second point you want. So it's just using your tape as a compass, and you're moving it, you're arcing it, you're moving it. Question?
Were we talking about that last week when we were talking about finding the second corner of the house?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes you have if you have a triangle, this is just a piece of geometry that's useful. You have a triangle and the base, so you have 2 points, and then you just know the lengths of the sides, but you don't know what angle they are. How are you going to draw it, right? Well, what you do is you take those two lengths in an arc, and where those two arcs meet, that's the top of your triangle, and you just draw lines connecting those 3 points. So it's the same kind of thing as you do in geometry when you're constructing shapes, and there's no other way you can do it. You kind of it's a place where two lengths meet.
Hey, Professor, this is
Yes.
Lindsay, the interpreter. For the arcing, it's not clear for me. And Hugo said that maybe he could use some more clarification. Do you have a tape measure? Maybe you could show what you mean. I'm a little bit confused about what you're
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah. I just happen to have one here. So I love questions like that. I want you guys to keep asking if you're not clear about something, because, in a classroom, I would actually do this automatically because we're all sitting there and I have all these tools. But online, it doesn't always translate the same thing I would do. So it's good that you tell me when it's not quite clear enough. So here's the tape measure, right? So I have to do it in the air because you can't see the ground. But say here's the fixed point, and here's 14 inches. Obviously, it'd be 14 feet or something longer, but so let's put it this way. So I'm going to keep this in the same place, and I'm going to rotate the tape itself. Let's see, how can I do it? Look,
Maybe on the whiteboard.
Let's look. I am going to do it on the whiteboard in a second. Well, okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Swinging around.
So here's the spot, the first line, and I want to do and I have, oh yeah. This is actually like that sighting exercise we did. Here's the first point we found on that site. It was the upper left-hand corner of the building. And then here's the, this said, the other side was so many feet, say 30 feet from that boundary, right?
Yeah.
So what we want to do is, this right here is going to be 26 feet, but we don't know. What we want to do is swing both of these. And then we want to swing this one. Here's, say 20, we measure out 26 to here. So I've taken this one and I've swung it like this, made that arc. You can make it in the ground, or you can just, we had talked about putting a string line across here, but let's talk about doing the ground. It's simpler. So you make this line in the ground, a little bit on either side of where you think that the point's going to be. And then you take this one with the amount, it was 26 feet in the thing, and you're going to make another arc this way. And you can do that in the ground too. And then where those two arcs meet, right there, that's where actually your line's gonna go to your house.
Got it.
You see that?
Yep.
So we're just arcing these, you go a little bit beyond where you think it's gonna be because you don't exactly know where it is. And so this said it was 30 feet from the thing. The other thing is this, if you're going 30 feet from a boundary and the line looks like it's straight down on the plan, you got to make sure you're drawing a line perpendicular from that boundary. And 30 feet, you can be off if you can't, it's not easy to eye that. So you could do a, you could do a 3, 4, 5 triangle from that point, and that'll get you a right angle. That'll establish a right angle, and that you could do that instead of arcing that side. But
I've seen that used. I've seen that used.
yeah, so it's faster if you arc it, but you could come down there and wherever that 30 feet was, say here, then you just connect that. That should be 26 feet. So have we talked about using a 3, 4, 5 triangle?
Yeah, I just used it the other day to square a deck. And I said,
Okay.
man, I learned this at CC in class.
Oh, great. Did you learn it in this class?
It was either your framing class last semester.
Oh,
or
yeah. Yeah, okay.
James's class.
Okay,
Talked
great.
about
Oh,
it.
that's great to hear. That's a really useful thing, and it's not that complicated. So great. Okay. So we're all clear about the arcing, yeah?
Yep.
I'll go back to, okay. So were there, Alec, were there just 3 questions?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. It's so funny trying to explain that online. It's such a physical thing, God.
Yeah.
That's why we can't wait till we get back in class. So did you guys think, so you don't need to answer me tonight, but keep thinking about the classes you want. And at some point, we're going to ask you to try to make a preliminary decision. Nothing's forever. You can make a decision and then circumstances in your life could change. So you want to change. That's fine. We're not committing you. It's just that we want a little bit of clarity so we can plan, but we're not even halfway through this semester, so we're okay. But I want you guys just to start thinking. I had this thought today. Life is pretty crazy right now. Have you noticed? It's really different than it used to be, huh?
Yep.
And I was thinking that I was trying to put my place in your position as a student at this time. The change doesn't bother me so much because I'm on my way out. So change here and there is not a big deal, but you still have your lives ahead of you. So, and this is a pretty chaotic time. And so I thought as an elder, I would give you a piece of advice. And I've been giving you elder advice all along. So you can turn your head and spit it out and just go on, or you can listen. But the thing about change is change never changes everything. It's always changed within a context. So a lot of things stay the same, and then within that, certain things change. It would be overwhelming if everything changed at once. We couldn't handle that as humans. It happens to some people. It happens to refugees and people that have political or climate catastrophes, and it's awful. Their lives are just really awful. We should empathize with those people and help them out all we can. And we may end up ourselves in that position someday. So one way to deal with change, to make it easier, is to make sure you do the other things that aren't changing like you've always done them. So keep that tradition, even the minor ones. So for instance, in my class, if normally in the past, being a good student was doing the work. You knew I was going to take this to class, didn't you? And so just pretend you're an old student, like the student from last year. And in terms of assignments and things, think about them the same way. Now you may still be thinking about them the same way. You may have done it that way before, and that's fine. But don't change everything. Try to, as a student, try to keep a lot of your student behaviors from before, and then just change the ones. There'll be a lot of changes anyway, because I mean, look, we're doing this online. I think that might be easier for all of us if we do try to do that. You know, people, when there's a lot of change, they kind of panic and they just sort of freeze and they stop doing all kinds of things in their lives because they're overwhelmed with the change. But that's just when you should keep doing those things in your life and try to keep your life as normal as possible outside of those changes. Yes, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, you know, people stop doing, like you see on the highway, people driving worse. I don't know if you've seen it, but it seems to me they are. That's no good. We can't stop being good drivers. You know, that's what
I
saves
think they're
lives.
more pissed
Well,
off drivers for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of us are angry for good reason, and it carries over into driving. I mean, I've always been an angry driver. I have to always watch it. But you know, you can't do that because I mean, road rage is just no good anymore, right? We used to be
Right.
able to get away with it. Not anymore. Don't do it. There's too much violence out there. You could get caught up in it. But that's a great example of driving. You know, drive as you've always driven, as well as you've always driven. Don't give up on rules of the road just because the world's going through some changes. It's a great example there. Okay, back to blueprint reading. So let's do some math while I got the board here. I was going to do it last week and I forgot, but a lot of times on a set of plans, you'll need to add lengths or distances together. Like say there's 3 distances and they don't give an overall distance and you want to know what that is. So you have to add each of the segments together. So adding feet and inches is different than adding decimal adding base 10 fractions and decimals, okay? We all know how to carry over from decimals, right? You add 9 and 10, and then you put the 9 down, and you have to carry the 1 over to the next column. We're all familiar with that. And it changes a little bit when you do feet and inches. Now, some of this may be so obvious, and you've always done this, so just let me get through it. But some of you, it may be new or you haven't done it a lot. So I've got on the board, oh, we could do a full screen too, couldn't we? Couple of problems. The first one's an addition problem. And say we're going to add 4 foot 10, 10 foot 6, and 8 foot 1. Can you all see that? Good enough?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like a decimal system in that there's places, and the individual inches and feet each act as a regular decimal system. So when you get to 10, you carry over the 1 of the 11 to the next column. But you have to make sure you're not confusing the inches and the feet. Those are separate lengths. So you add it in a column, the easiest way for all addition, if it's more than a couple. And you just, obviously, you first add the inches together. So you add 10 and 6 and 1, and you get 17, right? So what I would do is, and this is how I teach the math, is if you're really good at math, you can take shortcuts. And you know if you're good in math, you've had enough feedback from yourself and others. The feedback from others is often wrong, but nevertheless, you have an idea of how much you know about math. I tell students that don't take shortcuts at first. if they know it, then they can do it. Some of you know it's cold. You don't even have to be listening to this. But so what I would do is I would do all the steps, intermediate steps too, so I don't get screwed up by jumping steps and then making a mistake. So I would actually put the 17 down. That's not going to be the final, obviously. We don't express inches in 17 inches. And then I would add the next column of feet. So it's 4, 10, 14, and 8, 22 feet. So the answer is 22 feet, 17 inches, but that's not in a form that's standard. And people would say, what? If you told them that was the length you got. So this has to be, the inch thing has to be under 12, has to be 11 inches, can be 11 inches and 7/8, almost 12. But as soon as it's 12, it becomes a foot. 11 inches is a foot. Then it has to go over to the foot column. So how many more than 12 inches does 17 represent?
5.
Just
5.
subtract 12. Yeah, subtract 12 from 17, you get 5. So this actually becomes 5, and then that other 12 becomes 1 foot and goes over to the next column. So it becomes 23 5 inches. That's pretty straightforward, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. Probably most of you know that, but I'm just, I don't know, so I have to just going over it quickly. And then let's do a subtraction. It works the same way as a subtraction a decimal system. You borrow, you regroup things. So 2 inches, you can't take 9 inches from 2 inches, right?
No.
Right.
So we're going to have to make the 2 bigger. So let's take a foot from the 13 and make that into 12 inches and bring it over. So that means, and don't forget to change the 13 right as you do it. If you wait, you'll forget. So make that a 12 right away. You'll forget. It's so many students make that error in math. Okay, so we got a foot, which is 12 inches, and we're going to add that to the 2 to make 14 inches, right? We took a foot, made it into 12 inches, added it to the 2 inches to make 14. Now we can subtract 9 from that, yeah? That makes 5. And we've got 12 now instead of 13. And 12 from 10 from 12 makes 2. Everybody see that?
Yep.
So it's the same process as decimals, but just instead of when something reaches 10, it goes to the next unit because decimal 10's the limit. This is a 12 inch. It's not a 12 inch base, but it's 12 inches the limit. Okay, great. Just to make sure we see that. Okay, so let's go to the I'm gonna put the handout set 5 on the shared screen. Okay, everybody ready for that?
Yes.
We'll go over that. Oh, darn it. Oh yeah, Canvas. Oh wait. I have mine on my desktop, so let's do that. It's quicker. Quicker. Can everybody see frame construction?
Yes.
Donna, can you see this?
Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to do a little review of framing. Then we're going to look at framing plans. Some of you have not had a lot of building in your background. So if we just looked at framing plans, it might be overwhelming. And, I learned some things when I went over this. Now, one thing you got to know about building is the name of things, the terms for things vary regionally and over time. So I'll tell you when I see something on these handouts and plans that I suspect is not necessarily being used anymore or being used around Santa Barbara. I've been other parts in the country, so I know some of the other regional variations, but so this first set is a, yeah, this was the book. If you want a book on framing, and I can't find this book, I'm glad I've looked all this semester. It disappeared, but Taunton Press is a press for building books. And if you want a book that has just framing pictures in it, that's where I took all the pictures we're going to see. That's why I put this as a face page in case you want to buy this on your own. Okay, if you're working for a framing company, it's probably a great idea. So this is a floor plan or a floor picture, and it's got a basement, looks like, which we don't have a lot of around here. We have some. It's got a wall that's there's a hill here, so this wall's kind of staggered up the hill. So it's got a concrete foundation, and then it shows the framing that goes on that. So basically in a floor, you have joists that go across the floor, the building, that are going to hold the plywood for the floor above it. And these joists can be a span from one side of the foundation to another if the foundation's narrow, or often they need a beam. They can't span that whole distance. So there's a girder underneath, a girder or a beam underneath these. See, joist beam connection. So this will give you the names if you forget. So we have girders. There's a kind of an infrastructure, and then those are often in basements. The kind of foundations we do here, which are raised foundations or slabs. Obviously, slabs don't have any girders. They don't even have joists. But the raised foundations are usually just joists across the foundation. And if they're too long and you can't get a piece of wood, it's not convenient to get a thicker, long enough piece of wood, they'll often have piers or some kind of foundation point underneath that holds up the middle of these. They don't have a girder because they often don't have room. So we'll look in the foundation plans, we'll look at different ways the floors are supported in the middle of the home. Let's not worry about it right now. You see these joists, and then the joists have to be nailed to something on each side. And this terminology you might want to write down. A floor joist is the member that holds the floor in the bulk of the area, but then it has to be nailed into something on the end. So these have headers, a header heads off things, but it's generically a header, but we have a name for it, and we call this one a rim joist because it's the rim of the building. So joists nail into the rim joist on either side. And we often call the last joist an end joist, E-N-D. So we have rim joist, R-I-M, rim joist, and then we have end joist, which is E-N-D, the very end joist. Now, when I was looking at our plans, framing plans that we're going to look at tonight, architects get pretty sloppy with that, and they'll call everything a rim joist, even the end joist. So just be aware that the words get interchanged, but there's a logic to it. A rim is the rim that connects all the joists, and an end is the end joist itself. So
Can you point out the end joist there again?
yeah, this would be an end joist here. This is
Okay.
this right here. This is kind of a little addition, so it's hard to show, but it would be this one right here, the last joist coming forward. And then this joist here, the house steps up. This is a funny design, but the house steps up a couple of feet here. So there would be an end joist where it hits, there's a concrete foundation or where it hits that. So that would be an end joist there too.
So like the front and the back of a structure, and then
Yes.
the rim joist is the sides?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. The end joist is another joist. So it's going the same way as the joist, the rest of the joist, and the rim is cutting across. It's the thing that connects the joist together.
Okay, I got you.
And since it's the same size as a joist, they call it a rim joist.
Gotcha.
So those words are good. You know, I think they're still using those, but when you're on a site and your supervisor is pointing out something, he'll say, look at that end joist. And if you don't know the difference between a rim joist, you may go over to the rim and say, what's wrong with this? And you'll look pretty stupid. So the reason I stress these words when I do is that they're pretty basic working words. And if someone uses them, you need to go right. You need to know where that point is. Got it? Now,
Patrick, I have one question about that.
yeah.
So when you use rim joists, so you're having rim joists, but you have eye joist as the main joist.
Yeah.
You can't have those on the outside, so you use what's called rim joist material. It's like almost an OSB board all the way around, because those can't be on the outside. I wonder if that's maybe where that terminology came from.
Well, I think it's older than those, but I'm
Huh.
not sure. It could be. But you could use a regular 2x at the end of eye joist, right?
Well, they recommend you don't, because the 2x will shrink more because the eye joists don't shrink at all. But I'm sure you
Oh,
could.
for the height, yeah, the width, yeah, okay. We'll look at some of the plans. Well, you know, there's a set of plans we'll look at, and they have LVL laminated veneer for the rims. That's probably for that reason. You know, because they're like plywood. They won't shrink that in the width dimension. But I'll show you that when we get to it. Good point, though. Notice the plywood in framing, you do joist, and then the plywood goes across the long shape of the plywood goes across the joist. So you cover more joist with the single piece of plywood. That makes it stronger. If you had if it was 2 foot on center, you would only have 3 joists connected by a piece of plywood, say it was going this way. And that wouldn't be near as strong as having 5 or so this way. And then you stagger them also. So you start with a whole or half, doesn't matter. They start with a half here, then they go to a whole, and then the next one will be a whole one, and it'll break it halfway, see? And then there's different ways. They have this little thing that jots out, so it's a little different, but you want to stagger the joist, and staggering the joist not only makes it stronger, but it makes them easier to lay because they create a straight line. And if there's any crookedness, you kind of make up for it by having a straight edge along there. But anyway, they're engineered to be to fall on the floor that way. And I think that's everything for this. There's an interesting floor joist span. Now, a lot of these books have these kind of tables in it, and your modern carpentry that we use for a lot of our classes has these in the back. But mostly when you're building from plans, and everything's been spec'd out by the architect. The type, the species of wood, the grade of the wood, the size, all that's already spelled out for you, so you don't have to think much. The thing I wanted to show you about this table is the relative strength of different species of wood. So hem fir, and you guys correct me, some of you may know this. It used to be hem fir was hemlock or fir, whichever they took the wood from. You know, some acreage had hemlock growing and some had fir, and they just would call it hem fir, so it could be either one. And then Douglas fir. So hem fir included Douglas fir, but here they've got 3 listed. I don't know if anybody knows the difference between hem fir and Douglas fir exactly. that's the way it used to be. And you know, but anyway, the grade is number 1. That's the structurally strongest. And then I wanted you to see that how close southern yellow pine. So we mostly think about pine as being a lot less dense and weaker than fir. We don't frame with white pine, which is the pine we have, white pine, and what are the other pines in California? Ponderosa pine. But this yellow pine is from the south, and it's very dense and hard, and it's just about can just about span the same. In fact, expands more than the hem fir, and a little less than the Douglas fir. You see that on the chart? So whatever, this doesn't matter. These are just on center sizes, but you'll see the spans are about the same for all of those. So we don't use southern yellow pine here because we have plenty of Douglas from the Northwest and Canada, and we don't need to ship it from the South. So, but if you're in the South, you'd probably be using more southern yellow pine. Okay. Okay, next.
Sorry, you know what? The chart's still confusing me a little bit. Like, can you go over like the let's just say like the first one, 2x6, like what are those numbers?
Yeah, okay.
The
Okay, great
spans.
question. So this is the spacing of the joist. So on this drawing, these joists are all evenly spaced till you get to the end. Well, they start here, but the end down here is less probably. And those spaces are constrained by the law. They have to be at least 16 or 24. They use 12-inch spacing between joists if you're going to put a bathtub or a jacuzzi over it, and it's going to take more weight than normal. So you might use a little more intense spacing, but normally it's 16 to 24. And so this one says, I think it said 24-inch on center somewhere.
So the very first one was when I was looking at 2x6 hem fir number 1. And you
Yeah,
said
so if it's, let's say it's 16 on center, that's
Right.
more normal. That means it will support a floor 16 on center only up to 9.5 feet. You can't have it spanning more than 9.5 feet, 9.5 feet.
okay, so at that 9.5 foot mark, you would have to begin a new.
Yeah, you'd have to have a girder underneath or a pier in the foundation that, held up the
So
piece.
that one that's going down the center, like just for example, for the first one, that would be at 9.5 feet.
Yeah, the most this could be here would be 9.5. And same here.
Okay.
Right. There you go.
Okay.
So, this, I was just showing you the variation in wood and how they're not that different, but the architect nowadays, in the old days, I guess they spelled it out, but there was less wood. Everybody went to the local lumber yard in Southern Cal and bought Douglas fir or hem fir wood. And that they just built it out of that. They didn't need to, think about the plan. Of course, the plan always had to put the width of the wood 2x8 or 2x12 or 2x10, because the architect was responsible for it being structurally sound. So, but nowadays the architects spell out everything because they don't want to be responsible for a failure in the floor system. If it was, so they engineer it. I don't think they use engineers to actually spell out floor sizes. They might, because they're using structural engineers. Donna may know more about this. Donna, when you submit a plan and you've got and the architect calls for, what are these? Well, say 2x10 joist at a certain span. Does that have to be confirmed by an engineer, or will the building department take the architect's word?
Architect, it has to be all designed by a structural engineer. An architect doesn't count as a structural engineer.
So the architect, if the architect's not a structural engineer, can he still, is that sufficient?
No, he has to have his license as a structural engineer.
Even for normal floors, huh?
Yeah, but
Okay.
anyone can draw plans and submit them.
Yeah, and then you'll tell them it's wrong and they'll have to, and resubmit them, yeah.
Yeah, because it has to have the structural set has a structural engineer stamp. That's
Yeah,
not to say a structural engineer can't also have an architectural license either.
Yes,
You can be a
yes.
combo. There's
Right,
some
of course.
engineers that are combos.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the big firms have engineers in them that do the work. But it's just gotten more and more engineered because of litigation and stuff now. Nobody wants to take any responsibility. So, the buck stops at the structural engineer now. We trust him or her to be the authority on safe structure. Okay, great. Okay, so now here's a typical wall section. Now, as we look at the plans in a minute of the framing plans, usually you will not see a wall framing plan. And that is because it's pretty standard. And let me go through it. The floor plans, there's opening in the floor plans, there's spans this way, that you have to accrue to. So it's in some ways it's more complex, and that goes for ceiling and roof also. But walls have been designed either for 2x4 or 2x6 studs and plates, and those are the standard, and we don't normally deviate too much from those. Now when we're building more energy efficient homes, there's a lot of experimental structures with wider studs and double wall and all kinds of new things. But the traditional standard is a 2x4 or 2x6 wall. So these would all be 2x4. Now, if you do a 2x4 wall, you have to have a 16 on center spacing for your framing. If you build a 2x6 wall so that the plate and the studs are a little wider, then the space can be more because you've got a stronger structure going this way, and so you can go to 2 feet with a 2x6. You could always keep a 16 on center for 2x6, but you're wasting wood. You wouldn't need that. You could go out to 2x4 and save some wood, the 24 inches, and save wood. So the on center, like we saw up here, OC, that stands for on center. So walls, floors, ceilings, and roofs are all built. They're all essentially a similar kind of sandwich of headers and parts in between the headers. And just some are lying horizontally or at an angle, and some are vertical like a wall. But they're all kind of similar, and they're all made to transfer the weight of the second floor or the roof, if it's a one floor, from the roof or the second floor down to the foundation through the wall. So 16 on center 2x4, 24 on center 2x6 are all safe to do that.
How come I don't see a lot of 2x6 when I'm out in the field for some reason? It's mostly 2x4. Is that like for commercial more, or?
No, it's interesting because I lived in Maine for years, in New England, and you don't see any 2x4 there. So the whole north of the country, where the weather's a lot worse, is all 2x6 construction, because you can't get enough insulation in a 2x4 wall for a hard winter, for the kind of winter that the northern part of the country has. And you can put rigid insulation outside of the studs, right? Outside of the sheathing. But even that won't be enough if you have 2x4s, you're in a real cold climate. I mean, it'd have to be
So
really thick.
It depends on the climate. That's like out here, we wouldn't see that.
Well, here's the thing. The energy code, the building code, is becoming more stringent every year toward energy efficiency. And so they allow you to build with 2x4s because structurally it's sound enough, it'll bear weight. But you got to do a lot there's no way you could even come close to the new requirements for wall insulation with a 2x4 wall without a lot of rigid foam board on the outside. And, you know, it's funny because Jim and I used to have this argument, Jim Cunningham. He's mostly built in Southern California. And I've built in Colorado, New Mexico, and Maine, which are all have cold climates. And no, everybody uses 2x6 there, as a matter of fact. So, but Jim, you know, builders are kind of conservative. Once they figure out a way to do it, they'll do it that way till they die. And Jim's really stuck on 2x4 and all the stuff that goes with it. You know, I keep telling him, you know, they've done studies and okay, so you've got 2x4s at 16 on center, right?
Yep.
If you replace that with 2x6, you're stretching that 16 on center to 24 on center. So you're using less vertical studs in a wall than a 2x4 wall. Then you could say, yeah, but they're wider, so they cost more. They're 5.5 inches and not 3.5. Well, that's true in itself, but they've done studies on houses that use both, and they found out that you actually save money if you use 2x6. Well, with some extra minimal framing, which we'll talk about a little bit, but it actually can save you money, and it's easier to insulate. So I've always been an advocate of 2x6, but like you say, a lot of builders in this area have been doing 2x4 forever.
Yeah.
So they kind of stay with it. You know, in Maine, I used to build double wall houses. That's two 2x4 frames, maybe 6 or 8 inches apart. And then they put sheathing on the outside, and they put a what do you call it? A barrier,
Foam.
No, a moisture barrier, air moisture barrier on the inside, so that, and then they pump in loose insulation. Back then in the 80s, it was loose fill. They didn't have foam a lot yet, so they just use loose fill fiberglass or paper, and then so you'd have a foot. Let's see, be 3.5 is 7. You'd have over a foot of insulation in the wall.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out. If you got, and then a 6-inch spacing, 3.5. So it's like 13, 14 inches of insulation.
And they were really cool because they were like adobe houses. They were really silent. There was so much insulation that the sound was just nil. So they were very
crazy.
peaceful and silent. Yeah, they're great. I would still do it. I think and you're using 2x4, so you can, they're easy to put up. They're not so heavy, the walls. It costs a little bit more because you're doing a double wall, but you're going to save that in years of energy savings.
Insulation, yeah. It's crazy.
You have to span the openings, like the sills and the doors, with plywood, because you've got now a foot or so space. So you line everything with plywood to gap that. And then you do finish, trim on top of that. So I'm a big advocate of it, but it's not cold enough here to do it here. So I just don't talk about it much. But I will talk about it, as I do in all my classes, the variations in what you have to do, because if you move to a cold climate, and San Ynez Valley and Ojai, which are near areas, are bordering on those kind of cold climates. Ojai, I used to live there. It gets freaking cold in the winter. And I would advocate more of this stuff for even those places. But if you go anywhere where it's snowing, where it has a snow season, you have to use, foam or thick walls or whatever. There's just no two ways about it. Okay, so a standard wall has studs. These are called studs. Every 16, if they're 2x4, 24 inches from one to the other, center to center, side to side, however you look at it. And then they have a double top plate, and they have a single bottom plate. Now the bottom plates become larger because of earthquake seismic worries. It used to be a 2x4, 2x6. Now I believe it's a 3x4, 3x6. Donna could correct me. So they're really worried about it pulling up from the foundation has anchor bolts that hold it together, and the earthquakes just pull the wall right through the anchor bolts. We used to have little inch diameter washers around the anchor bolts, and after the Northridge earthquake, the walls just, the force of the earthquake just pulled drilled that washer right through the wood, and the walls just went flying. Didn't take much to rupture that connection. So they keep expanding the size of the washer. Now it's like, what is it, 3x3? Anybody? It gets thicker. It's probably 3x3 by 3/8 now.
The anchor bolts? Or are you talking about the?
Yeah, the washer on the anchor bolts.
Yeah,
Donna, do you know what the minimum size anchor bolt washer is?
They're about 3 inches by 3 inches.
Yeah, and
I
how
don't know
thick?
how thick they are.
Yeah, they're probably 1/4 to 3/8, but
Yeah.
that's what they figure will withhold an earthquake. It won't get past a 3x3 plate. So, and then am I correct? The bottom plate is now a 3x.
No,
No.
that's only on shear wall call out. It's usually when I see a 2-inch on center shear wall. That's when I see a upgrade on the size of the bottom plate.
So
All exterior walls. Also, all exterior walls in California building are 2x6 walls. That's standard.
All what?
All exterior walls in California building code are 2x6 walls.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, but okay. Well, how many of you have been building the last few years 2x4 wall construction?
The only 2x4 walls we've done had blown in insulation. Excuse me, not blown in. They had sprayed insulation. That was the only exception.
Yeah, that's correct. But most of your exterior walls now are 2x6.
Yeah, because they can't. It's less for seismic than and structure than for insulation, because the code's going green. So, okay, I didn't realize that. That must be something they've been doing the last 5 years or so. So there you have it. So it's not even allowed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
That she says it. Not come to think of it, they were all interior walls that I was talking about. So.
Okay, great. There you go. So Donna, what about now? What'd you say about the thickness of the wall? It's thicker.
You
It has to be-
mentioned you were saying that bottom plates have to be 3x pressure treated wood, and that's not correct. Only
Okay.
time I see a 3x bottom plate is when it's a specific call out, usually on shear walls, which are nailed at less than 4 inches on center.
Yeah,
Most
but
all
but
your
how would-
exterior bottom plates are 2x6s.
okay.
Common.
Okay, so the shear wall area has to have a 3x, and it'll
No,
just
it doesn't have to have a 3x. I see the 3x call out on shear walls that are less
you
than 4
see it.
inches
Oh,
on
okay.
center. That's when it's most common.
okay. So there you go. So it's still aside from, but almost every house has shear wall. Part of the walls are shear walls.
Only specific shear wall from what I've seen. It's only
Yeah.
certain ones, and the engineer specifically called it out. Normal shear wall can get by with the 2x plate.
Yeah. Okay. So, but yeah. What was I going to say? I can't remember now. Okay. So but the bottom plate will be pressure treated if it's against a slab. I mean, slab, right?
Yeah, it has to be treated.
Yeah.
It
So
has to be.
see if I have a foundation. No, we'll look in the foundation when we get to foundations in a week or two. But I'll just tell you right now, in this area, we usually have a couple types of foundations, either a thickened slab foundation, slab on grade, they call it, where the walls just go right in the concrete, and that's your floor, the concrete. And people put tile or, wood floors on top of that. Or you have a raised foundation where it's off the ground. There's a crawl space underneath. And then you have just instead of a slab, you have just perimeter walls, maybe some interior walls if they have to gap, if the joists have to run a long way. And then you just have a floor system on top of that. So a slab doesn't have a floor system. And a raised foundation has the floor system like this right here. See, this is a raised foundation here. It's raised off the ground here. So when wood touches concrete, whether it's a stairwell in a basement that has a concrete floor or it's walls on a slab, the wood, the bottom plate, whatever touches the ground, touches the concrete, has to be pressure treated because water will seep up through the concrete into the wood. And if there's no chemicals in there to kill the dry rot and the little critters that eat away the walls, your walls will disintegrate over time. So we poison nature above a slab. Okay, so let me, so are there new students that think this, going over these framing things is useful?
Yes, very much. This is
Okay.
kind
Very,
of,
very much.
Okay, great. I just want to justify, like I say, I learned something, especially from Donna. She keeps me straight. I learn something all the time. You know, like I said before, I'm not in the field anymore. I haven't been for 10 years. So, you know, we've had a lot of code changes in those 10 years. So I depend on Jim. You know, I'll ask him, I say, what are they doing now for this or that? And he'll say, because he builds all the time. So he'll tell me. But I have to rely on people like Donna or Jim because I'm just not out there. So, so when you have openings, whether it's in the floor, and we'll look at that later in the floor, like a stairwell or a, what else is in a floor? I don't know. You have to reroute the forces. So these forces are coming down from the roof or the second story. They're coming on that double top plate. So it's designed to hold it with studs, let's just talk about 2x6 now, since that's the requirement. So it's designed to hold the weight with 2x6 two top plates and 2x6 studs at 2 feet on center, 24-inch on center. But when you punch a hole in a wall, then you've got all this weight coming down into a void, right? Doors and windows. So you've got to do something to reroute those forces. So they put a big header and the weight comes down through these little cripple studs. These are just little cut off studs. Weight comes down 2 feet on center, hits this largish header, and then the weight goes sideways to the trimmer and the king stud, and that goes down to the ground. So it's very specific and it's very conventional how these are designed. They haven't changed a lot over the years.
can the headers, do they have to be 4x4 or can you just slap two like
Yes.
two 2x4s together? Or?
Yeah. So this next, if you look down at the drawing below.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. See, so on the right side, there's a double header.
Yeah.
And this saves wood because this takes a bigger tree. You know, for
Yeah.
a tree not to have knots in it to make a lot of beams, it has to be a pretty big tree.
Yeah.
This is better for our forest to use these. Plus, if it's a non-bearing wall, you can get away with one of these and you can put insulation in the rest, I believe. Donna would know about that too. Used to be able to put just one in a bunch of insulation. Now you might have to have two. So if you had two, say it was a 2x6 wall, 5.5, each of these is 1.5. So that's 3. So you have 2.5 inches in the center. You can put a nice big chunk of
Oh, I see.
foam.
So they would spread it out and put it in between like a sandwich.
Yeah. And on
Um,
your non-bearing walls, so if you have a gable roof, we'll talk about this later. The triangle roof, the sides of each triangle bear the weight. The front end doesn't bear as much weight. So you could get away with a lot less structure. And we'll look at that. There's a thing called advanced framing. It's designed to minimize framing, to keep it strong and approved by the building department, but to use less wood. So that's been a green movement for 20 years. And we'll talk about that in a bit. So, yeah, and if we're talking about a 2x6 wall, these are going to be 6x6 headers, right? So that's a Now we're talking about pretty good sized wood. But anyway, the headers are all designed. It used to be we could take the width of the window, say this was 6 feet, and we could use 4x6 above it. That's how old I've been building. And now it's all got to be done. And the walls have to be engineered too. Like the header has to be approved by a structural engineer.
Yeah, that's a call out.
Yeah.
I'll see that
Okay.
in the framing plan.
Yeah.
And it's on the door call. It's on the door schedule too. You'll sometimes see the
Yeah.
header sizes.
Yeah. So we'll look at our framing plans in a second and see those. But like I said, there aren't many framing plans for walls because walls are always done this way. The size of the header is spelled out, but it's spelled on the floor plan or some other plan. It doesn't have to be spelled out on its own wall framing plan. So we'll show you that how a lot of sets don't have the wall. They'll have the floor and the ceiling and roof. Anyway, so the weight comes down to these little cripple studs, goes to this header, which has to be sized to be a substitute for these studs. And the architect knows how to do it, and actually builders know how to do it, but they have to get the stamp from the engineer. So we just share the wealth, you know. And then it's got a piece called a trimmer that holds up, that's underneath the beam, that holds it up. Now you can replace that with a piece of hardware that you can hang the beam on. That would eliminate the need for this trimmer. So in our advanced framing, that's sometimes done. And there's regional differences on how long this trimmer is. When I framed in New England, we put the sill all the way to the king stud, this outside stud. And then we put the trimmer between the sill and the header. And then we put another cripple stud underneath the sill to kind of hold it up. And so that varies. The length of this inside trimmer. See, it says trimmer. That can go to the sill or all the way to the ground. And then the studs continue underneath in the same layout as these. Now that's not critical for the weight because the weight doesn't go down here and come around and then go back this way. The weight comes down and then it goes straight to the ground. The reason these are the same as these is because this is a layout. Your framing layout, say it's 24 on center, it goes 24 from there to here, and then 24 from here to there. So when you're putting sheathing on the outside, it will take advantage of that even layout and you'll use your sheathing up more efficiently. So the layout goes through the doors and windows. You know, you'll see it here. This space here is the same as this space here, is the same as this space here, is the same as this space here, and on. Got that?
Yes.
Okay. So this opening inside the innermost framing, inside the trimmer, is called a rough opening. So if you have a 3-foot window, it used to be you would take your window, say it was 3 foot wide, and you'd add an inch or 3/4 to that and make this rough opening that. But then this was way back in the 70s. And then in the 80s and 90s, there were so many more window manufacturers and they weren't making uniform widths. So you could have a window that was is nominally called a 3-foot wide window, and it could actually be 3 foot 1 inch or 2 foot 11 inch. And so your framing would either be too wide at that point and you have to fill it in with stuff, or it'd be too narrow and you'd have to take apart your framing. So now we just get the rough opening from the window manufacturer, and that's what we stick to. It'll be on a plan, a schedule plan. It'll tell what all the rough openings are, and we can just frame right accordingly. And so there's also a height rough opening also. That's right here. Okay, anything else on this? I think that's pretty good for that. Yeah, so here, you know, it has a 4x header, cripple stud, double top plate, trimmer. They usually call it a trimmer, not a trimmer stud, but whatever. King stud's a regular stud, full length, plate to plate, but it's the stud that the header joins, runs into, and it's the last stud before the window. So we call it a king stud to separate it from the other studs. So when you're doing a layout on the ground, you have your top, you take your top plates and you lay them out first. And this plate should go across here because you have to have the wall connected to build it and then raise it. And then you cut that plate out when you get it up for the door. So this isn't quite, this is a wall already in place maybe. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So you're laying out your plate. So you would start at this end. You go 20 feet. Now, I mean, 24 inches. If the on center is 24 inches, and it will say in the plans, that means from the center of one stud to the center of the next stud. Y'all see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's, if you go center to center, that's the same as going left side of stud to the next left side of stud. And I'll draw that out in a second on the board so you can see that. Because,
Patrick,
I'll
I have
show-
a question. If that's 24 in center, what size is that doorway?
well, these are probably 16 on center.
All right.
Because down here, it's the same page. They're using 2x4.
Hmm.
So these are 16, so the door is probably 32.
36.
You were thinking it was a really small door.
Really big door.
With a big door.
Oh, really big door.
It'd be
Yeah.
like 50 inches.
Yeah. No, these are probably 16, so it's probably, 3-4, 3-6 door maybe. So anyway, I'll do that on the board because, I mean, you guys don't mind going over the framing in this detail, do you?
I like
No,
it. 'cause
I
don't
like
usually
it.
deal with it.
I mean, we do it in all of our classes. Jim's 2 classes, especially we do it because they're the beginning classes. But I have a framing class. I go over it again. You can't really go over it too much because for beginning carpenters, you just have to know this stuff and it takes repeated exposure to it. Okay. So, okay, good. Yeah, I'll show you how they lay out a wall. I didn't think we'd get into that, but I'll do it on the board in a second. So here's a walls in place, 2-story, give you a little more. See how this is called a partition, an interior wall is called a partition. And it can still be 2x4, even though the outside's 2x6. And
Right.
what they do for the second top plate is they make a gap in it. And so the top plate of this partition goes into that and locks the walls together. Makes for a real strong frame. They do that same with the corner too. But there's a new type of framing, I was telling you, advanced framing, and they only use one top plate sometimes. Hey, why is there an echo there? Is that me or is that you guys?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It stopped. Okay. So the advanced framing, they do away with the second top plate. And if I don't show you that tonight, I'll show you, I'll get a picture of it from a book and show you to you next week. Because you have to look at corners and intersections of walls and different things. The headers can be different. Yeah, there's a lot of variations. So we'll look at, but this is the old standard framing. So the second top plate, the top plate ties the walls together, kind of locks them together. Lateral bracing, you don't see a lot of it now because we do sheathing with the plywood. And one of the reasons we do sheathing is because a lot of times we'll have shear walls, which are special extra strong portions of walls. They take a little extra strength plywood, and the nailing patterns more, you use more nails. And so since you've got to use plywood for those, rather than try to piece each stud between those with a little, something the thickness of the plywood so that the surface is uniform for siding or stucco, they just sheathe the whole thing. It does make the whole house stronger that way also. Donna, is sheathing required now everywhere, even outside of shear panels, or can you still do bracing?
Shear panel is only called out by the engineer.
Yeah.
All other walls can either be studs and then you apply your paper to them. But most contractors just like to make a big box.
Yeah, but they don't have to be sheathed outside of the shear panel,
No.
right?
That's
Yeah.
that's what I said.
They've been doing that for so many years. It's like, it's sort of the tradition, even though it may not be necessary, but you don't have to put braces in, which you might otherwise. And braces take time. The sheathing goes on pretty fast. It does cost money. Plywood's not cheap, but builders have just gotten used to doing it. So you rarely see a residence in the area that's not got plywood sheathing all around it. Okay, anything else on there? So these boards here are either rim joists or end joists, depending on which way you can't see which way the joists are running. But if they're running this way, then this is a rim joist, and this is an end joist, and vice versa if they're running this way. Okay, now here's a floor framing plan. This is more these kind of drawings at an angle, isometric drawings, are not included in plans. They're too hard to draw. This is an educational book, so it has those, but you usually see just straight on things like this, or aerial view plans in a set of plans. Okay, and we'll look at the sets. But a floor plan, this is a typical looking floor framing plan. It's got a big girder. See this big girder here? And it's got, these joists are hung on the girder. So you have hardware that hangs them, and we'll show you those later on. They may be hung on the outside. They may not, because you can back nail through this. Just like studs, you nail studs. You don't need something to keep the stud to the plate. Unless you live in a seismic or a hurricane zone, which is fast becoming everywhere. But back nailing still accepted in other words, you don't have to use framing hardware everywhere. There's some places. Here you can't back nail. This is too thick. You couldn't get a nail in to the thing. So where there's a girder like this, you have to hang. But on the outside, you can nail. So this is the same as the wall. When you have an opening for a fireplace or stairwell, you're taking away some of these joists that bear the weight of that floor. And so you've got to make up for that. So how you do that is you double up this header here. This is called a header when it's the end of a thing. So you double that up, and this is against the girder, so you don't need to do anything on this side. And you need to double up the ends. So you need to put an extra joist on each side, and that means the weight can be distributed to these members. So this weight that would come down here on these few joists that you're taking away would be diverted to these double framing, and that would take up the weight there. So there's, it's the same thing as a header and a window. Anytime you have an opening in a weight bearing setup, you have to compensate for it.
That's only applicable in two-story places, obviously, something like that.
No, anywhere you have this, anywhere there's a puncture, there's an opening in the floor or ceiling or roof or wall, you have to
Oh.
you have to double up or thicken certain members to make up for that loss of, continuous structure.
I gotcha.
Okay. See here, 2x10s at 2 feet on center, 2 feet 0 inches on center. Typical. So that's calling out what those are. Calls out hangers. Usually they're more, once we look at, this is an educational drawing. The ones we look at will have a lot more details and things spelled out. So here's a case. Say you wanted to know the distance from the outside of the building to the stairwell. Looks like that's what this is. So they give you this stairwell opening, and then they give you this. Say you wanted to know this whole one. There's a case where you have to add 8 foot 0 3/4 inch to 7 foot 8.5 inch to get that measurement. Okay. The architect supplies what he or she thinks will be enough dimensioning, but occasionally they leave off something that a builder needs. So the builder has to, combine measurements or maybe just take his scale and say these weren't here at all. He might have to take a scale and just measure where the stairwell starts and stops. Okay, roofs. How we doing? Let's finish
Good.
this. Let's finish the handouts, a couple more slides, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll look at some plans, and then we'll go home, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so a roof, this is a site-built roof here, and we'll look at trusses in a second. But it has a typical, this is a gable roof. I have a picture of roof somewhere. Next week. Give you the names of roofs because it's good to know what they're called. This is this triangular roof where the front of it, the sides of this side are just, these are walls, stucco or siding or whatever. And then the roof covers the whole side of the building on each side. That's called a gable roof. And G-A-B-E-L. Is it E-L or L-E? Well, next week we'll have it. It's probably E-L in England and L-E in America. That's how that stuff usually works. So the main thing of site-built roofs are really simple. There's usually a rafter. If they're this kind of roof, a rafter on each side, and the rafter's connected to the top plates of the walls. And then there's a ridge board that kind of doesn't do much except keeps these rafters from falling down. And then they usually don't have collar ties. That's usually some kind of special thing. It's usually just a triangle. Very simple. And they're usually 2 feet on center as you go down the building. Here's an aerial view. This end here is the gable end. That would be looking at this one from the top. You have the ridge, and then you have common rafters go to the side, and they sit on the wall there. And then we have what's called a hip roof. And these don't make a lot of sense from this aerial view. So when we look at, next week, we're going to look at elevations, and I have a handout that shows you the shape of different kinds of roofs, and we can focus on the names of them then. But it has a hip rafter, which is a little thicker, that goes off at an angle. And then it has commons that go down from there. So this roof has roofing all the way around on all sides. So it's very weatherproof. This one, the weather could beat against the wall because it's not protected, but a hip roof's more protected. So you see these in tropical areas, you see a lot of hip roofs because they deal with the weather better. Same thing, 2 foot on center. It could be 16, but roofs are usually 2 foot on center. And it keeps going. See, even through all this crazy valley building, it still keeps up the the on center. And then in the hip, they're 2 foot on center this way. So when you put plywood across this, it'll always, the ends of the plywood will always hit in the middle of a stud. That's why that's one of the reasons they have that 2 foot center. Okay, well, here's a view. I take that back. Next week, we have more pictures, but this isn't a typical hip. There's a little doodah in here. This is called a Dutch hip. We actually have a lot of these in Goleta, Santa Barbara, but a hip would go all the way up. Hip roof would go all the way up. This hip would go all the way up to the ridge. But this one, it cuts off and there's a little, the roof continues and there's a little triangle here. Originally, that triangle had a window in it and it would let air blow through. And then the hot air would rise up and go out of the house. You see these all over the world, Japan, Europe, Holland. That's why they call it a Dutch hip, or Germany. Here we just do it decoratively. Somebody in Goleta really loves these. There's all kinds of housing tracts that have these. Now here's an opening in a roof. So it's the same thing. You have to double up on the side, possibly double up on the bottom. This one doesn't have it, but it depends on the size and how much space you're using. When two roofs hit each other, two buildings hit each other, like in this kind of construction, where these two hip or gable roofs meet, sometimes this ridge will be up even with the main ridge, but this one it's a little lower, but that creates valleys. So these are low points where these two roofs meet. And the water will come down and down that valley. In our roof framing class this summer, we're going to build a gable roof, a hip roof, an intersection, so we have valleys, a couple of different ways to do valleys. Then you have a shed roof, which is just one pitch. You see those usually, well, post-century modern buildings, and you see some of those designs in the Mesa here, they'll have shed roofs. But typically in Santa Barbara, we more have gable roofs and hip roofs. The rafters have tails that stick out over the building to keep the weather from getting in there. See, these are all 2 foot on center also everywhere. Okay. And now I don't know what the percentage is. You'd have to go to each house site and record it. Actually, Donna would know because she sees these all the time, but I suspect it's still probably even with site-built roofs like this, where they get the wood on the site and they build everything there, versus a truss where it's manufactured in a factory. You send the blueprints to the factory and they make trusses for the whole roof, no matter how complicated it is. And then they send these trusses back to you. And they send a plan like this, which shows the cord, this bottom thing's called a cord, top cord, webbing. This makes it stronger. So you can use 2x4s instead of 2x8 rafters because you've got all this webbing that kind of holds it up. A lot of people are using these because then they get there and all you need is a crane to kind of put these in place and a couple of carpenters on each end nail them in place. But, you know, the old school stalwarts like me like to build site-built roofs. Sometimes they're so complicated that you can almost build any roof with trusses, but sometimes contractors like to build site-built roofs. It's actually kind of fun. This is a stair detail, and this is framing, but we're going to look at details later on in the course. You know, the page that has all these specific details, but I put this in here because you have to know how to frame stairways. So usually stairways don't go all the way up in one run because it would take too much room. So they build a platform and then they go halfway up, and then you walk on the platform and go the rest of the way up. So, and this floor above has to be stopped, you know, for the stairway to come in there. And this platform has to be the right height so that it's the same, that the height from the platform to the first step, all these are the same, because steps have to be the same height. So we have a framing class and a math class that go into the math and the details of framing stairs. We don't do it in this class, but that's a great class. Okay, if you have basements, you might have posts, steel posts, or other posts that hold up, you know, joists in the middle here. The joists are lapped. They're not this. Remember that span we're talking about, 8.10 feet or whatever that would be from here to the outside wall. And they might have a steel beam or a wooden built-up girder underneath these joists. So that's a type of building. When you have a raised foundation, you have a little foundation wall that comes up from the footing. You have a plate on top of that that the floor system is built on. It's called a sill plate or mud sill. There's different names. And that's treated because it's on the concrete. And the anchor bolts go through it. And then you build a floor on top of that. So that's another little piece of framing, that sill plate.
Is that overlapping common? Is that, wouldn't that like, throw off your measurements kind of sometimes?
Yeah. You know, when you have like joist, that's
I don't know
harder
what I
to,
do.
it's harder to lap those because they just have a kind of a top and bottom piece that sticks out.
Oh,
You could, because you can put fillers in it, but they might butt those and then have, you know, in the middle part where the strand board is, they may have pieces of wood or metal that strap on both sides.
it just seems like if you were trying to like nail plywood to that or something like that, it would throw off your measurements.
Good
Or you-
point. It would. Good point. That would throw off your measurement. So you'd have to allow for that. This
Okay.
one would be better. You just have to make sure they're, well, an engineer would have to okay the connection here, but you just have to make sure that connection's good. But that would make more sense. Good point.
See.
Here's the hangers I was talking about. So you hang the joist onto the beams because you can't nail, a nail is not long enough to go through a beam. So you have to surface mount them.
Right.
And they spell out exactly the hanger that you need. There's a hanger for every application. Company kind of has the monopoly on it, Simpson Strong Tie. They have a giant catalog, which in other classes we go over. And you have to use their connectors now in the way they say with the fasteners, the nails and screws that they specify, or your plans don't get okayed. And if there's if you snuck by the inspector like Donna, and the house came down, you'd be liable for any injury or destruction. So, you know, a set of prints now is a legal document. And if you don't build according to that document, you're liable for any failure in the construction. When I was your age and building, some of your age, you younger ones, we would actually modify these these hangers for certain situations. And then the earthquakes came along, Silmar and Northridge, and that was the end of that. They said no monkeying around with these. We make them to be used the way they're designed, and now even they have special nailing and they have special nails, and it's really a high tech field now, which is good, saves lives. So things have changed. See, there's a metal hanger for every application. There's even bases for posts. So you name it, and there's something there. And the architect will spill these out. Right here, normally a stud doesn't have to be connected to a bottom plate, except often in shear walls, they'll have a hold down, and that'll be a bolt that goes from the concrete up through the plate and will actually attach to the wall, because they found out that if you have three nails in a 2x6 wall going through from the plate, a hurricane can make handy work of that. It'll just pull those walls straight up through those shiny nails and out. So in hurricane and seismic places, you have to secure the studs to the both plates with various types of hardware or hold down bolts. There's a whole, here's one where see the hurricane clip, because hurricane, the wind would blow the rafters would be here coming down, and the hurricane winds would get under the rafters, push that roof up, and the plate would just come up with it because it was only nailed down into the stud. So now you have to have a hurricane clip to hold that together. So we've learned a lot in the last 30, 40 years about seismic and hurricane stuff. And buildings become more complex, but that's kind of the way it is. So these are blocks or bridging, they used to call them. Most people would just use wooden blocks nowadays. Some occasion you'll see, as you demolish things, you'll see wooden cross, they're cut at an angle and they're put in between, or even metal ones used to space. I don't see too many of these anymore, but because you got this, they just use scraps. You cut the joist down, and then you take the cut-offs. Often they're big enough, and you can use those for blocking. Let's skip that. Picture's not good. Oh, this is something you should all know. So wood has what's called, and you can write this down. Oh, a nominal, there's the word at the bottom, N-O-M-I-N-A-L, nominal, that means name, what the board's name. So a 2x6, or let's say a 2x4, nominally it's called a 2x4, but it is not actually 2 inches by 4 inches. It's actually 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. They've knocked off, in this size, they've knocked off a 1/2 inch. So the nominal size 2x4, the dimension or real size is 1.5 by 3.5. And this tells you what all the sizes, nominal size and actual size. So a 1x2, like a little board that might be used for lattice, is actually 3/4. Most 1 dimensions are down to 3/4. And then 2 dimensions are usually down to 1.5. So a little piece of lattice board would be 3/4 by 1.5. A 2x2 would be 1.5 by 1.5. Here's where there's some discrepancy in timbers. Let's see, where am I here? Oh yeah, no. In boards, yeah, here we go. So a 2x4 is 3.5 wide. All 2x materials 1.5 wide framing lumber. That's just standard. You don't have to worry about that. The widths are 3.5 for a 2x4, 5.5 by a 2x6. See, there's 2x6, 2x6, 5.5 is the actual size. 2x8, 7.25. So it leaves the 1/2 inch realm and goes in the quarter. 2x10 is 9.25. 2x12 is 11.25. But there's a caveat here. When I was your age, these all were pretty accurate. Since then, they've fooled with 7.25, 9.25, and 11.25. So 2x4s are still 3.5, 16th more or less, 5.5, 16th more or less. But 2x8s can be anywhere from 7 1/8 to 7.5. 2x10s can be anywhere from 9.25 to 9.5. 2x12s I found vary the most, from 11 to 12. So it's not quite as uniform as it used to be. So you have to really be careful when you're ordering wood. Usually you order framing wood from one lumber yard, and it's usually one lot. But if you go from different yards, say you want to pick up some pieces from Home Depot, you got to check the width because it may be slightly different. And if you can probably get away with an 1/8 inch difference, but if it's bigger than that, you'll have to either shim some or plane some, which you don't want to do. When you're framing, you want to just pick up the wood and make a frame out of it. So you got to make sure if your sources are different that they're uniform. Okay. Then we have a thing called engineered lumber. I think this is getting toward the end. And there's I'll make a chart of that for you guys, okay? There's a whole bunch of different names of this stuff now. And the names change. So I'll do a chart that has a couple of names for them and then what they are, rather than try to explain it to you. But what they've done is they've made beams mostly out of something besides just trees, the way they come out of the ground. They've either taken a bunch of plywood and laminated together to make the beam, or a bunch of strands of wood that they glue and pressure together, or several pieces of regular lumber, like 2x6s that they just laminate. So there's a whole variety of engineered. It's called engineered because they make it in a factory. And it's usually as strong, if not stronger, than the same equivalent natural wood. And it saves wood too. It's a very green thing. So we'll talk about that later. Here's the I don't know why you'd have a foundation wall here that's underground. So ignore this picture. That's kind of fishy. Usually the footing's underground and this is above ground because that's where your crawl space is. But this is a thickened slab. A slab has to have a footing where the walls go, so, extra thickness to bear the walls. So they just take the slab and they turn it down at the end when they form it, so that it has a lot more mass underneath the walls. So they call it a thickened slab, thickened edge. That's pretty typical here. And then we have the inverted T wall, this one, except above ground, called a raised foundation. I'll give you a better picture of that somewhere. And that's it for the framing review. And as we go after break to look at actual plans, we'll look at 3 or 4. I can fill you in on other either words or abbreviations or things that you might need to know. But this is a good sort of background. So are people understanding all this?
Yes.
I'm back, so wake up, everybody.
Now, so far, so good.
Okay, so I know some of you know all this. John, some of you have been working for a while, so just bear with it. But you've been asking good questions, and we'll look at real plans after break. So let's take 10 minutes till just before 8, and then we'll go maybe a half hour till 8:30, then we'll go home. All right?
Good.
Okay, see you in 10. I'll be around in case you want to ask questions.
I have a quick question. Is there
Sure.
a Zoom? Is there a link through what is it called, Canvas, for these meetings? Because I had to go through my old email that you sent me.
Yes. Let me go to Canvas, okay?
Okay.
I'll just go right to Canvas, and picture's worth 1,000 words, right?
Yep.
Oh, that's not right. Oh, maybe.
It's actually a good question because I got it through the email too.
Okay, so you're asking about,
The link to the Zoom meetings through Canvas.
oh yeah, okay. So go to, oh wait, you can't see this, hold on. Sorry.
I got it up. I'm separate like right now, so I have my Canvas up.
Okay, well, let me just, for others. Can you see Canvas now on mine?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you've got all these things. We usually go to syllabus. If you go to files, no, I'm sorry. I'll go to files. I know that's not what you asked, but I just wanted to show some people.
Okay.
Why doesn't it? Oh yeah. So this has all of our blueprints that we use. Then it has the handouts, the set through 5, and I'll be adding to that. And then it has that first set of prints that we did. So that's there if you need to go that. And then go back to announcements.
Right?
Okay, now that has the Zoom. Please don't say these aren't working. So here's the first week, second week, third week. So if you
Right.
zoom on, if you go to that, of anybody that does that,
Those are the recorded ones, right?
and I'm pretty
Yeah,
much
yeah.
you know, this
Well,
is John.
so-
This is John and
I
our.
ordered your last book and I read the first and last chapter, but
Which one? Oh yeah, yeah.
it's sitting.
I saw that. I saw the link to the old Zoom meetings, but then to the actual when it came time to this one, I couldn't find it.
So I'm sorry, I'm still not understanding you.
He's,
So like the one for tonight's class, I to the Gmail and click the link there to get on the Zoom. Is it available on the Canvas? I think that's what you're asking, right?
You're,
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
not asking about tonight. You're asking about the Zoom link for every week.
Yes. Yeah.
the
current-
Zoom link.
Last week was my first week, so he sent me an email.
Oh, God. Okay, I misunderstood you, Duke. Okay, so let's go back to Canvas.
Okay.
Well, one thing I do, especially for the teachers that just send it out once, is once you hit it one time, you get that link, that post meeting link.
Yeah.
You can bookmark that. You can always go to that bookmark, hit it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the smart way. Now the
Because,
stupid
like-
way is to go
That sounds
to.
like my way. How do we do it that way?
John's always got the smart way. I always have the stupid way. One way is to go to home on announcements where the other Zooms are.
Okay, let me bring that up. So home. Okay, I'm at home.
And that's, see the link there?
January 20th, February 2nd, group
No, no.
discussion.
You should, did you hit the, no. Did you went to announcements first?
No, you only, okay,
Yeah,
announcements.
I'm sorry. Go to announcements first.
Okay, on my announcements, it only brings up the former weeks that we
Yeah.
did.
But see at the bottom, it says homepage.
Oh yeah,
Click
click
that.
on that. Ah, there it is.
There it is. Okay, there's
Okay.
another place. There's another place. And do what John said. Try to, put it on
Bookmark
your,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
bookmark it.
bookmark
Yeah,
I'll
there
do
you
that
go.
too.
Now I've got it in another place. I think the syllabus has it. John said let's see. 950. Let's see if it's the same one. Yeah, I think that is. I think I corrected it. So if you go to syllabus, Duke, it's
Oh yeah,
also,
there it is too.
it's there
Right
too.
there at the top.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
All right,
Perfect.
great.
I knew I saw it somewhere.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I was
so-
kind of like scrolling through a few little things before class and I kind of panicked. So I just went back to the old email.
yeah, because you came in late, the first day I kind of went through all that, but you're good now.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Patrick, are you going to go over electrical and plumbing,
Yes.
mechanical plan reading?
Yes.
The framing
it's-
overview is just a precursor for looking at framing and basic.
Yeah.
layout plan.
Yeah. And, the framing plans that's actually a plan that you have to really be able to follow because that's the way you have to build a building,
I had a question. You talked about the summer classes and the fall classes that you were going to do a roof framing in the summer, and then there was going to be like trade math.
Yeah, the trade math will be in fall, I believe.
Yeah, that's another fault. The one I was in, I don't know when it'll be available again, but I was interested in doing this time. I didn't make it, and like I work 40+ hours, so it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
I think it was the intro to trades or whatever? There was a class on, I think.
Yeah, that's CT 111, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Any idea when that'll be?
Well, it was this semester, so
Yeah. How does it usually, does it roll around like in a year or?
yeah, it should be next spring.
Okay.
Those we try to keep fall and spring because they're the beginning classes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then
So that one does less framing, although I
Right.
designed it originally and I designed it with hardly any framing, just kind of a review like we did tonight.
But it
because
does
I
like
want-
electrical, plumbing.
Yeah, it's supposed to have more, but Jim knows more about plumbing and electrical. So as soon as he signed on, I gave that class to him. Because I knew probably as much as most of the students, but I didn't want him to I want him to hear from someone who's doing plumbing and electrical at the
Yeah.
present. So he does that. And then there's drywall and foundation, concrete.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the other, the adjacent skills too.
Right.
Yeah.
Any idea on how it's going to be once they're allowing in-person learning? The only reason I ask is because I live so far away. So I took advantage of going to Santa Barbara because you guys offered these classes and it's online. But when it goes back to in-person, those classes are going to be expected to be in person, right? On campus.
Well, I haven't really thought about that. They will be, but Jim taught a class a few years back on contractor's license prep.
Oh yeah.
And that was a hybrid class. So the class would meet in person a little bit, and then they do stuff online.
Right.
So we have the opportunity to do a hybrid class.
Right.
But usually there's no reason to because everybody's lives close.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we could probably get more students. But what Rodney and Jim have been trying to figure out is how to have a hybrid class where the students who live far away wouldn't have to come to the labs, where they could come to 1 or 2 labs the whole semester.
Yeah, see, like something like that would work because I can, my schedule's pretty flexible, especially for continuing education. They promote that, so
Yeah.
I could make it work for a couple, but I wouldn't be able to make it work all the time. And unfortunately, Ventura College, Moore Park, Oxnard, and College of the Canyons, it seems like everybody has a couple different types of courses on.
Yeah. For guys like you that are in the trade,
Yeah.
the online are okay because you're
Right.
working in those fields, right? And you see it
Yeah.
every day, so you don't really need to have the proximity. But for the beginners, it's really not easy. So we don't like them because half our class are
Oh
beginners.
yeah, because you learn a lot when you're hands-on and.
Yeah, but we would get more students, which is partly the problem is there aren't enough potential construction workers in Santa Barbara
Mhm.
to, for instance, allow us to have more than one section per class. We'd love to
Yeah.
have a couple of sections so people could have their choice of time.
Yeah.
We've never had more than one section because we just can't, there's not that much population to fill them
Is
up.
it in the area over there? Is it because a lot of it's already built out, or
No,
just or
there's just not that many, a lot of the
that's not what they're
construction
striving
here
for?
is from out of town companies from LA and
Yeah.
places. And there's just not enough carpenters, or maybe they don't know about it. I mean, we've
Yeah.
tried a lot to
Well, like I got a
advocate.
buddy. He's a union carpenter, and he works for Security Paving.
Yeah.
They're a huge outfit, but shoot, we live out here in Fillmore, and he's traveling. He travels all the way to Bakersfield every day.
Yeah. I know.
Jeez, that would kill me, man.
I lived in Maine, the state of Maine for a while, and I was getting my elementary and high school teaching credential.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I drove for an hour in the snow in the winter.
Oh,
I
man.
drove an hour each way.
Uphill both ways. Yeah.
I was gonna say,
No.
at least we were walking like our grandparents walked uphill 5 miles.
Yeah. And I tell you, so I know about that. It's not
Yeah.
fun. Not fun at all.
Yeah.
And I work 40 hours a week and, you know,
Yeah. No,
What?
I know. I got busy at work today, and I think I left Oxnard at like 5, and I ran home, and I just got on in time. I
yeah,
said, "Nice."
yeah. So let
The
me,
good thing-
so Marcos, let me work on that. Let me talk to the guys and see.
Okay.
I mean, you know, we
I
have
mean,
to,
I'm not going for my construction technology degree.
yeah,
Trying
or
to
a certificate.
maybe because
Yeah.
the position I'm in right now is management,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I mean I worked my way
Right,
up,
right.
and
So you're already over that hump. So
well,
Yeah.
I mean I want to have a good because honestly, like I was saying, I did a lot of landscaping,
yeah,
and I'm just barely scratching the surface on building maintenance and facilities.
right,
I have experience. That's why I'm taking these classes, is to
Yeah.
brush up on the so I
Right.
can have a foundation.
yeah,
And but eventually I think my degree, I want to go for business administration, because at that level it'll be like a basically like director of facilities or
yeah,
what.
sure.
So
Sure. Yeah, good
Um,
goal there. Well,
yeah, but I mean I totally interested in taking, or and I didn't even think about their certificate. That might be a good option to have.
well, yeah, you know, what I tell students is it's handy if you're competing for jobs. You're in an area where a lot of people
Yeah.
are applying for jobs, but most of these students are going into framing or finish, you know, actual carpentry. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And the certificate would help. An
Yeah.
employer would see that and go, geez, you spent 2 or
Right.
3 years going
You were
every week
dedicated
to these
yeah.
classes. You must be serious about construction.
Yeah, no,
And
that's
you,
that's the
and you
point
probably
I'm at.
know something too, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the point I'm at in my career, where my experience years kind of speak for itself, but
Yeah.
I really don't have as much to stand on as far as education.
Yeah.
So I'm trying
Well, yeah,
to.
I hear you. I hear you. And it's, you know,
Yeah.
it's a what do you call it? A credential game, you know, out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, and I tell my students, I say, you know, the more credentials you get, even though they don't always mean you learn more, sometimes they do, the better. In our system, it's just better.
Yeah.
You know, an AS is better than nothing, better than no degree.
Oh,
A
yeah.
BS is better than an AS. A master's is depending on your career.
Yeah.
And school's not always easy, so it's a big choice people have to make, you know, but
Yeah.
the reality is your pay in the long run's better.
Yeah.
You know, the more degrees you have, and it varies, you know, like in building, you don't want to get a PhD to go out and pound nails, you know, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but you know, a bachelor's degree, a lot of times companies look at that and they go, well, this guy's got a bachelor, so he's probably got more math behind him than a person without a degree. And he
Right.
may have more English skills because he went to school more. Therefore, when he rises up in our company and starts doing, you know, starts writing stuff and estimating and doing that, he'll be a better, you know, risk than someone without any kind of
Yeah.
skill. So
Yeah. No, I got you.
yeah, so you know, you need to think about not just your immediate building career, but you know, the advanced stages of it.
Long term.
Yeah, and you can always go back to school when you get to
Yeah.
that point. You know, people do that too.
Yeah. We never stop learning, right?
Yeah. So it looks like we're mostly back. So let's get on it so we can. Let's see, what do we got? Oh yeah. So let's go to the tempo. And is that tempo or temp? I think it's temp 005. Let me go there. Share the meeting. Okay, do you see that?
Yeah.
So this is that kind of educate, you know, the temp set is kind of our education set. And like I said, it's not always realistic in terms of the way they put various things on the page. They're trying to save room. Like you would probably never have this this isn't something you need to tell a builder. This is to teach people how to do it. So you probably wouldn't have that in a set of plans, but nevertheless, they're clear plans and they have a lot of things. So floor framing plan. So let's look at that. These are just, these pictures are ways of, like, say you have a wall, interior wall, and it's on a floor, a first floor, and that floor, that wall goes right over a joist. So you don't have a problem. That's made to bear that wall, that joist. But say you're off center a little bit, the wall's like, say, in between the joists, then you just have the floor, the subfloor and the flooring between, that's bearing the weight of that wall. So you'll have to do something. This one's right in the middle. You have to do something like put blocks this way, every so many feet to support that wall. So these are just variations on how you can block up beneath the wall. And they call them A, B, C. And then on the plan, these are all B, which refers to this one. Then there's C, which refers to this one. The C, you can actually see the blocks, right? See, they're between the joists because there's probably going to be a wall that goes right along here. And when you're at home studying these plans, you would see that and you'd go, oh, there's blocks. I wonder, it would trigger you to think, oh, there's probably a wall right here. And then you go to the floor plan and you'd have those two plans next to each other. They wouldn't be on a email screen. I mean, on a screen, computer screen. And you could actually even put the plans over each other so that you could see where the wall actually lies. That's the nice thing about plans are on vellum, which is a semi-transparent, translucent paper. So you can sometimes overlay them and see how things work. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
is it just me or is everybody's like view of his kind of blurry?
well,
A little bit.
Tiny bit.
Oh, there, that just kind of cleared up a little bit.
I can make it, I'll zoom in on it a little bit. That'll probably help.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's your internet connection, not necessarily the zoom level. Unless you zoom in a lot, that's so big we can see it.
I can see it better now that he did that. I can see it a little bit better.
Okay. So, I'll go a little bit bigger. So this house has a deck. If you look at the floor plan, this is a deck right here. And it's got a deck in the front too also. So these are decks. Notice that it calls this 2x6 rim joist, right there. So that's at the end of a set of joists. So that's what we've been calling it. There's other places where they call it they use the word band joist sometimes. Down here on the right, on the main building, 2x10 band or rim joist. Now that's parallel to the joist, so you could call that an end joist, but because it's on the outside of the building, that's when they might use the word band or rim instead. So just realize that there's a little bit of controversy on how those words are used. Here we've got 2x10 rim joist on the end, so that's how we've been saying it. And this would be an end joist here, right there, and also right over here. Okay, so you'll notice there's a girder here, and it's spelled out continuous 1 3/4, and that's 2 of them. So they're laminated, they're put together. 1 3/4 by 11 1/4 laminated veneer lumber. So that's plywood, plies, actual like plywood, a whole bunch of them together to make 1 3/4 thick. And then there's 2 of them put together. So when you look at this beam, this is the first floor. So these this beam probably spans, it's probably got a beam pocket in the concrete foundation wall on this end and this end. And you can double check that by going to the foundation plan, which we won't do tonight. We'll do that when we go to the foundation. When we do foundations, we'll come back and I'll show you. But you can see it's got piers. Dotted line means it's below. So it's got these piers with posts that are holding up that girder. It's a pretty heavy girder, right? So you kind of want to see how the framing is put on the girders and the piers throughout the building. That's what you're going to be looking for on this first floor framing. And why they have a ladder here is because probably there's a wall, which your floor plan would give away. It was probably a wall right here all the way to the front. Any questions about anything on here? Oh, here's something I wanted to point out. See this 2x8, see this, it's not a dimension, right? It's a dimension line because it's got the hash marks or the, what do you call those things? John,
The tick or a
what do you call it in a computer?
A slash?
Forward slash or?
Forward slash, yeah. So the ticks or forward slashes, those are usually dimension lines, right? Like up here. See, there's one and it's got, no, that's not there either. Okay, so here's something to know. Framing plans often don't have dimensions of lengths of things because that's on the floor plan. So you have to make it according to the floor plan. If the floor plan shows this from this width of this dining room to be 20 feet, that's how you make it. So they don't need to put it on the framing plan because you already know what it is. They just on the framing plan tell you what kind of wood's going to go in there and how it's going to be spaced and that kind of thing. So they use these dimension lines for the spread, not the span. The span of a joist is this distance, but the spread is where the joists are actually laid down. They use this to show the spread of the joist. So from this point all the way to this point, you're going to use 2x6 deck joists at 16 on center. And it tells you how far those go. You see that? So same thing here, 2x8 joists at 24 on center. These tick marks, they're not measuring anything. They're just telling you that the joists go from this point to this point. Now it's pretty obvious here, but you might be in a place where like right here in the middle of the house where actually the layout changes. So they're all 24-inch on center across this whole span. Well, here it's 16 on center. And so that tells you that that's going to end and it's going to start 2x10, a slightly different size at 24 on center until it ends again. And then you're going to have these I joists, which are, 2x12 equivalents from here to there. So that'll tell you when the joist dimensions and spacing changes, where those tick marks are. Got that?
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. This says 2x8 pressure treated girder drop means it's underneath. So this is holding up the deck. And they, it's visible, so it doesn't have dotted lines. And actually this pier concrete base is visible too, but they put it in dotted lines so it doesn't interfere, it doesn't get in your way. So there'll be some kind of, pier or what do you call the tubes? Sonotube?
Caisson?
Yeah, but the actual tube, that you put the
Oh, I forget.
sonotube, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
So that's what that is. And when we look at the foundation plan, you'll see what that is. It'll show it. So some things they'll show you with a dotted line underneath just to let you know what's holding up the various things. So then you'd go to the, so when you saw that, if you were a little unclear, or you want to know the size of that, you'd go to the foundation plan, or it might have a detail, an arrow with a detail designation that tells you where to go to look for the detail of that thing. Any other questions on here?
You know, I looked up those end marks in my program.
The
It's-
hash marks?
Yeah, it's end mark number 3. Does that help?
And in what program?
in Autodesk, the CAD program for
Oh,
lines.
oh, so it's for blueprints, right? It's blueprint symbols. And what do they call them?
There's no name. It just says end line option 3 for you, because you can just have the arrows, and that's the third option.
Yeah. I like the hash marks. I like arrows are more fun. This has both. See, there's the designations or the little annotations are usually by arrow.
So sometimes when you use the arrows, the end of the line mark, like if you're marking the thickness of a wall or something, there isn't room, and then you got to push the dimension over.
Yeah, like do we see one of those on here? Well, see this down here, this 5 3/4 and 16.
Yeah.
It is that 15 3/4. When you use an arrow, it's on the inside, right? So it takes up room. So these hash marks take up less room, but if it were an arrow, a lot of times I'll put the arrow on the outside pointing toward the, it'll stop at the line, it'll point toward the 16, right?
Yeah.
And I'll show you that when we have an example of it. So scales, 1/4 inch to a foot, pretty typical floor plan. If there's no questions, let's go to.
You know what? You pointed out earlier. There's a couple like in between the joists, like letter C there. Like there's more little.
Oh, here.
Yes, right there. That's just bearing more weight? Is that why there's more?
No, it's because the if you go to the left where the key is for that.
Oh yeah.
It's because the wall's in the middle, right between the 16-inch space. That's the weakest point. And you can't really put you're sistering extra wood onto a joist, right? Here you're just putting a piece next to it because it's close enough to the joist that you don't need to do much more than just thicken that joist.
Oh, when it's in the middle, you need to add those.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't build up or it'd be solid. So you put them the other way.
I got you.
Yeah, good question. Good question.
That's referencing a section drawing, and usually a lot of times the sections are on a different page.
Yeah.
So it'll have the section and the page that it's on. So those are it's giving you an idea of what section that is in a more detailed.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we need to go to the ceiling framing. Oh boy, can't wait, huh? So that would be 07. And that would be Zoom meeting, and that would be share screen, and that would be here. Okay, so you've all got these in your files, but so here, the optional light gauge steel framing, you wouldn't have that on a plan. They're just telling you some options. But ceiling framing plan, same 1/4 inch to a foot, because these are all based on the floor plan. They're all kind of variations of the floor plan, because that's the footprint of the house. So this has got an actually complicated ceiling because it's got a lot of different levels, and there's a big open space in the middle with a cupola over it, which this will make no sense unless you look at an elevation. So we should do that in a second. But it's pretty much similar. You know, you got, instead of floor joists, you have ceiling joists. Again, no dimensions, just spreads for how, where the joists go. They go from here, from here to here. So let's go to the So, okay. Okay, so that same set of plans, the second drawing is an elevation, which usually doesn't go that early. This order of these plans isn't great. But see, it's a pretty complicated elevation, right? You've got a garage that's set at an angle, which we'll go back and see. And then you've got a porch, and you've got a little part of the house coming out. I think it's the bedroom coming out, toward us, this gable roof here. Then you've got a kind of a main roof that's also a gable roof that goes the length of the house. And then you've got this little cupola, this opening with windows and a roof on top that let light in, and it's just kind of a fancy little thing. Interesting, it's got solar panels and solar hot water panels. We like this, huh? Now this TDD we'll look at later because I can't remember what that stands for, but those are solar tubes. John knows it. John has a mind for remembering this crazy crap. So John, what is TDD? Is he gonna talk, or is he gonna just?
Are you sure that's not TBD? That's not to be determined?
No, it's a fancy way of saying solar tube. So I thought you remembered it from last time. Oh, here it is. Tubular daylighting device. I love it. So we call them solar tubes here, and we'll discuss those later. But it's definitely a TDD. Okay, so this is the view down here is looking this way, going this way, this elevation down here. So you see that main gable roof, and then you see that little cupola off to it with its own roof. And then you see that projection to the front. So it's a pretty messed up roof. And then this back roof's what they call they have a name for this. Where is it? Somewhere, we'll find it. It's kind of a McDonald's type roof. And there's a fancy name for it. We'll find it somewhere. But anyway, so you have to check the elevations to see what the hell's going on in the house, right? Even the floor plan wouldn't make this real clear with this cupola and these projections. So you go to the elevation, you check it out, and then you go back to the floor plan, which was what, 5? I mean to the framing plan, sorry, or floor plan. And now, no, we went to a 7. You're gonna kill me. Okay, so this is the ceiling framing plan. Now this is where the cupola was. Now you know what this opening is, right? They have an opening, and it's probably going to have walls above it, to go up a little bit above that other roof. And then you're going to have another roof on top of this. So that's why, so there's no way you could understand the ceiling without looking at the elevations. And if they had, what do you call it? God, sections. They might have a section through one of these to show in detail from the inside what these various different height roofs are. We'll have to see. I can't remember if they do or not. But here, you just see the front's a bedroom, and it's got its own roof. So it helps you understand the ceiling and the roof framing. Is there a roof frame on here? Oh my God. How lucky can you guys get? Okay, roof framing plan. This is the last framing plan for this plan. So see how they need a roof framing plan because you've got this little, how many sides is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know. It's like a hexagon or octagon or something, octagon. And so you kind of need a roof frame to show how it's going to be fit together. Now here's a great one. See this garage? This garage is at an angle to the house, right? And the deck between the house and the garage has a roof over it. So this garage is a well, it's a hip on the front with a gable on the back, but it has a ridge. And then it has a, I guess you'd call it kind of a type of hip rafter that springs from the ridge down to the front where it meets the deck roof. And then there's from the deck, into the deck, there's another rafter that comes up and attaches to that. And then these rafters all come and attach to this. We'd have to look at, that's a pretty complicated roof. This roof's going down and this roof's going down this way. And this is how they meet. So that's really difficult to picture, isn't it?
Yep.
So you go, what the hell? Actually, with this kind of framing, you can just kind of connect the dots. These all have to be at the same level on the top. So no matter what dimension lumber, the tops all have to line up because you've got roofing going over it, and the roofing can't have a peak. So oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so here's these are different elevations than the ones we just saw a few minutes ago. But here's the garage from the, no, here's the garage from the back. See how the garage is kind of a triangle gable roof? But then it hits the deck roof coming across. So that was that rafter we saw where the roofs joined. So you would have a hard time picturing that roof unless you saw the finished product, which is just a gable roof coming down this way, and then a gable roof at an angle coming down this way. What makes us all screwed up is that this garage is at an angle from the house. So you get this kind of weird valley here. You see how you would kind of need this to figure out what the heck was going on?
Yep.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. They call it a parapet wall, but they have a name for this roof too. It's really weird. Okay. So, whoop, we're getting near the end. Okay. One more, okay? Don't everybody cheer at once. One more. This one right here. Okay, one more. We'll finish this off. You guys have been good tonight. So the Chumash Learning Center. So this is a weird set of plans, but there's so many of them that you're bound to find what you want. So this is called a new partial site plan, but what it acts is a roofing plan. Now, a roof plan is not the same as a roof framing plan. We just looked at the roof framing plan. This is a roof plan. So this is looking at the roof from the air, and it's whatever's there. So you're actually seeing the roofing material. And we're going to look at another one later in the course. But this really helps you see how the roofs are going. So here's a gable roof. It's got a hip roof coming off of it. this is a raised area. Well, we can see the elevations all on this one. This is a gable roof. This is a gable roof with a ridge going there. This is a gable roof that's the building's attached. So you've got a couple of valleys here. Let me get you a elevation. So here, that's that raised part. So it's got its own roof. You can see that, right? So that's a pretty complicated meeting of different buildings and roofs. And I had to spend about 20 minutes last night going back and forth on the plans to really, and then they got this little weird little fun thing here. Is that a bell? Anyway, it's a mission bell, huh? That's a joke, huh? Okay. Then they call this one a roof plan, but it doesn't, it's more complicated than the other one. This is useless, right? I can't, you can barely tell what that is. The other plan was better, but they don't have a roof framing plan, but they have a section that at least shows you the trusses. So that'll show you what the upper roof looks like as trusses. And then it just shows you the joist coming down here. So there's not much more to know about that. Gable roofs are pretty straightforward. And then here's a truss that's in this lower building. So you get to see that. So these are kind of like, these sections are acting like building plans. They're showing the framing of the trusses, how the trusses are framed. See, so you get a little bit of that, even though it's not called a framing plan. There is no roof framing plan. But I noticed that these kind of act as roof framing plans. See what else there is. No, the rest is just details. Okay. So I had a couple others, but we're not going to look at those tonight. Everybody's tired. Any questions about any of this?
With those trusses, what do you guys put in between those to keep them from falling one way or the other?
Oh, great question. Great question. We cover it in other classes, but since we're talked about them, they don't have a ridge, right? Because they're individual units. So you have to put a blocking in between each one.
Oh, okay.
And so you have to, the first one, you have to stand up and you have to brace it from the ground so it can't fall over. And then you don't put those ridges on first. You put the, as you put each truss up, you put a 2x4 on top that ties it to the one before. So you put a lot of lateral bracing. And when you get it all up, then you cut the individual ridge pieces, put them in, and then you probably, since the roofing is going to go over the 2x4 lateral bracings, you have to take that off. So you want to make sure that if you need bracing, you go on the inside and do it from underneath.
I see.
So a lot of bracing involved with trusses. That's why I don't know if anybody's ever done a really good calculation of the difference in cost between trusses and site-built labor, and because the wood's certainly cheaper when you build it on site. You're just getting, 2x12s, a whole bunch of 2x12s, this and that. And a truss company has a charge for their trusses. It's not going to be cheap because they're manufacturing them in a factory. And then you have cranes that are involved with trusses, most of them, a few small ones you can put on yourself. You have cranes, and you have, a lot of bracing and auxiliary stuff that comes off and on. So it'd be an interesting calculation to see which one was cheaper to do in the totality. But they say trusses are faster, and that would be an interesting thing to compare, because good roofers. I used to work with Frank Skipper Construction, huge construction company in Santa Barbara, and he's retired, but we were on a trade organization together, and so we used to talk stories, stories of the past. That's what old people do. They talk about old stories. And he was alive. He's a little bit older than me even. And when he was in Santa Barbara, when he was a teenager, they were doing roofs as, what do you call it? people would just go in and do the roofs. You know, they wouldn't be the regular framers. They'd have a guys come in and just do roofs for a certain amount of money. How's that, huh? Your company's not paying you hourly to build a roof. You're going in, and so you have to have your poop together, you know, to do that, right? Because it's, you know, it's you're the one who's making the money, so you got to make sure it's organized. And those guys, when they do it that piecework, when they do it that way, they're really cheap. I bet they'd beat a truss equivalent any day.
Just specialists. That's all they're doing all day.
That's what they do, and they're really good at it. It's like John knows. We show a film of this Larry Hahn. It'd be the same way. You get a couple of Larry Hahns on a roof, and they'd whack it out he would do roofs in a day, which is, you know, most framing companies don't do that. But when it was piecework, he would do a roof, you know, a residential average size house. He'd do it in a day.
Him and a couple guys, or him?
Well, yeah, probably a couple guys because the rafters are long, but they probably weren't even skilled guys. They're probably just guys to handle the other end of the
Awesome.
stick, you know. But so I'd be surprised, but you know, companies organize the ways they do for various reasons. So who knows what determines whether they use trusses or, you know, site built. Okay. Any other questions? That's a great question. Yeah, in our other classes, we go like the roof framing class. Obviously, we'll talk more about trusses and site built framing. You know, that's all that class is about. But this one, we just discuss enough to be able to read plans. But those are really good questions because, you know, you have to understand all this stuff because it's appearing in front of you on the paper, right? So,
yeah, I mean, just seeing, even just like I've seen a bunch of framing. I mean, I'm in concrete, but I've seen the guys, you know, like throwing the framing up and just never actually paid attention to how it's all coming together with the headers and all that type of stuff.
yeah, you know, the crews, it'll be a crew, right, with a supervisor, say, and it all seems to go, they all seem to know what they're doing and it goes up pretty fast. But part of that is because a lot of the legwork was done at night, the night before or the several weeks before. The supervisor and the general contractor or a medium supervisor will go over it and make sure everybody's on the same page, and they'll analyze and they'll actually either make an actual list or in their head, they'll determine the stages, right? So when they hit the ground the day they're going to build those walls, one guy knows everything about it. He knows what order they're going to do it, where you're going to get the wood. So it looks effortless when you watch it, you know, but it's highly organized more than you think. Yeah. More questions? Okay, so tomorrow I'll have the Zoom up for this class, you know, probably by noon, 11 or noon. And I'll also put some questions in, and I'll put a blog question in for you guys, okay? And everybody send me your line drawings, okay? I'm extending that a week. I know you're busy, so maybe you just haven't had time, but I want you to prove to yourself that you're on top of that, you know?
That was actually a fun exercise. I kind of like doing it.
Yeah. And it's just, you know, that's probably the best way you can figure that out. If you do it all wrong, I'll see it and I'll go, no, you need to shift here and there. But it's without you being here and me being able to go to each desk with a scale and show you in person, this seems like the best way to do it. So I want you all to do it, you know, in a week or two. Some of you, a couple of you have done it. Thank you. Okay. That's it. Next week, what's next week? We do, I think it's elevations. That's going to be fun. That'll be interesting. And I've got a file I'm going to send you, and it'll be part of the assignment. It's just 3 pages of handout that you can read during the week. I'll send that to you tomorrow. And it'll be in the file section of your Canvas. Everybody copacetic? They still use that word. They still use that word these days?
Yeah.
We used to use kosher, but that nobody knows what that means anymore. Now we use copacetic, and I'm sure you young guys have other words for all that stuff too. Okay, I will see you in a week.
All right, Teach. Thank you.
Yeah,
See
any
it.
questions or problems, make sure you email me. I'll keep you straight, okay?
Okay, thank you,
All right, sounds
Patrick.
good.
Okay, all right, see you later.
Did you
All right,
take
see
roll,
you, Patrick.
Patrick, by any chance?
Oh, yeah, hold on, let me take roll. I'm so bad at that. Miguel. Miguel Barbosa, were you here? Jesus Barreto?
I'm here.
Yeah, I thought so. Alec was here. Donna was here. Hamar, you were here, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Marcos was here. Colby, were you here? Yes.
Yeah.
Hugo was here. Eric was here. Dylan, were you here? Yes, of course. Edward and Kevin, were you guys here? They're not brothers, but they're still a mystery factor. Okay, Duke was here. Brandon, you were probably here, right? Yeah.
Here, I'm here.
D'Angelo, you were here, yes.
Yep.
John was here. Michael Silva and Jose Silva. Yeah, there's
Michael was
Jose.
here, I think so.
Was
Yeah, I'm
Michael?
right.
Yeah, okay.
Michael was there too.
Okay. And John Tapia is here. Johnny Vasquez, were you here? And Jacob wasn't here, I don't think. Were you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are. All righter. Okay. Sorry. Okay, guys. I'm good. And of course, Debbie and Lindsay and Katie were here. My girls. Can I call you my girls, or is that too my female accomplices?
Yeah, you can call me anything, just don't call me late for dinner.
There you go. All right, you guys. See you later.
Right.
Bye-bye.
See ya.